What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a video about why this is and always will be a PC channel. So I'm making this video specifically so I can add it to the channel FAQ playlist, which might then go on to explain that this is a question I've been getting a lot lately. And as always, I can only answer those so many times before I'm like, alright, I just gotta make a video to point people towards, which is what this is for. So chances are, if you're watching this, you've probably either heard me say that this is in fact a PC channel, or that I don't like using controllers or something to that effect, and we'll certainly get into all that, because broadly I think it basically comes down to three things: what I'm comfortable with, what is convenient, and lastly just straight up time management. And they're all kind of interwoven together a little bit. But before we dive fully into that, I did just want to say that that doesn't come from a place of like weird console war stuff. That's not anything I care about. Quite the opposite, actually. I think both consoles actually make pretty great games. There are games that Sony has made that I love despite not really covering their PlayStation exclusives. And I even think a company like Nintendo, which I don't do anything at all with, even when they do come to PC, which is rare. But they also still make some great games. And the way I view it is that the more great games that are in more people's hands, the better. But keeping that thought in mind, as the channel has grown, more and more people have been asking, like, what is stopping you from buying a console and reviewing these games there? Which is a pretty fair question, because it's not money, because not only has doing this full-time been generous enough to me that I'm able to afford that, it's also just straight up a tax write-off if I did so. Buying that stuff exclusively for the purposes of using it to review video games that I then put on the channel, which is how I make my living, very much so a tax write-off if I did it. But it's less a measure of can I do something versus I don't want to. And that comes down to the things I want to get into in this video, which are, as I mentioned, what I'm comfortable with, what is convenient, and time management. So let's start breaking those down a little bit. What I am comfortable with, simply put, I have been using PCs to play video games since I was under the age of 10. Now, initially, when I was very young and I got to experience games on a PC, I was fascinated by them. If you watch the channel a bunch, I had a very rough childhood, didn't get to play a lot of video games for a big chunk of time, and computers and just tech in general really seemed out of reach for me, and it kind of created this almost mystique that I was really drawn to. And because of that, I've just played and messed around with them extensively since then. And in so doing, I got extremely good at using a keyboard and mouse over a standard controller, which is a big reason why you'll hear me basically do everything I can to avoid using one unless it is absolutely necessary. There are times where it comes up. I own controllers, both Xbox and PS5 at this point. Those are mostly insurance policies for games that come to PC, having abysmally bad keyboard and mouse support, which occasionally happens, but 9 out of 10, I'm going to be able to get around that, simply because I've been using it for so long and I know what I can do to make that more comfortable for me, and not to mention all of the peripherals PC has to make that even easier. Meaning that keyboard and mouse isn't just keyboard and mouse, it is extremely customizable based on what you're willing to spend money on. And yes, sure, I could use a controller, I'm sure, and eventually reach a level of proficiency with it, but simply put, that's kind of inconvenient. It would take time, I don't really feel like investing in it, and perhaps most stubbornly, I don't want to, so I'm not going to. But what I'm comfortable with is also very connected to what happens to be convenient. You see, there are a lot of sort of logistical things that go into using a PC to actually make videos and reviews and edit them, and part of that is actually the controller. It's inconvenient for me to have to do all of that because I don't like playing with controllers, basically. But really, that's only one piece of the convenience portion of it. So the other part of that is more logistical. For instance, if you record all this gameplay and stuff on a console, you have to either do things like capture cards, or I believe PlayStation actually allows you to record up to an hour now natively, but even then, I then have to transfer all those files. And when you are reviewing a game, that's not just like one short clip. That's hours upon hours upon hours of footage that I then have to spend time transferring to a computer so I can actually edit it in all my software. And while it might sound like a simple step, you then compound that by all the games I review, 60 last year, and you've got a task I might potentially have to do several times over, and it gets really, really annoying, adding to that logistical issue. And you compare that to just being on PC, where I hit 2 buttons and I'm recording, turn it off when I'm finished, and then it's magically where I need it to be, and I just open up editing software and get to work. Not to mention I can then also record audio right at my desk, and that's a much more convenient workflow for me than introducing more hardware, more software, etc. that I have to use separately, and very likely an entirely separate room of my house even. And frankly, it's very inconvenient. Now, I can see why channels that work with like editors and stuff don't mind doing all that because they're offloading some of that work to somebody else. But this is just me over here on this channel, and having to manage all that on top of everything else I've got to do is just giving myself more work in a way that is going to cause minor disruptions to what is already a very tight schedule. And it's much more of a hindrance to me than it is anything else. Hopefully reinforcing that, again, PC is both what I'm comfortable with and what is convenient for me. But we're still not done, because then we have the biggest portion of this, which is time management, actually. So while this absolutely kind of bleeds into what I was just talking about with convenience, what I'm referring to here is just straight up the ability to say, actually, I'm not going to cover that game right now. So with as many games as I cover and all of the games I'm reviewing all throughout the year, etc., my schedule is very busy and it is very packed just covering what is on PC that captures my interest. And as I mentioned, nothing against consoles. I think PlayStation exclusives, which would be, I would say, the biggest benefit of me adopting any change, so it's worth mentioning that one specifically. PlayStation makes a lot of really great games. I loved Ghost of Tsushima, the more recent God of War games, etc. And yeah, there are absolutely games coming out exclusively for PlayStation that I think would be really great to play when they release, and it would certainly help the channel probably. But the problem with covering as many games as I do at the pace that I do is that sometimes there's a lot of games releasing all at once. As an example, February is going to be a nightmare. And oftentimes it's convenient to just be like, oh, this is on PlayStation, so I don't need to cover it until it comes to PC. And that kind of winds up becoming a convenient way to organize things for me, because I can cover it later. And while your initial impulse to that might be that it hurts the channel in some way by not having these games covered, for starters, I'm not really concerned about that, but two, it's actually not entirely true. So I'm going to give an example of GTA 6. That's an upcoming game likely releasing this year that everyone's talking about, and it is not coming to PC right away. That's such a huge release, and I do not plan on covering it when it comes launch time. And I'm actually not worried about that at all, because frankly, everybody and their mom is going to be talking about that game when it releases, and likely for several months afterwards. And that's when you'll see all these reviews and videos about it coming out en masse. Fast forward a bit to its PC release, and suddenly you have a game that I could cover, likely in a more complete version than what it launched in, also handling specifically how it runs on PC, and I can drop a review that includes all of that information while both nobody else is dropping reviews, and it has more relevant information than the ones they had to begin with. And that is a strategy that has thus far actually worked out really well for me. I have data and analytics from YouTube to prove that. It does tend to work out quite well. Is it quite as good as it would have been when the game launched? Probably not. But does it allow me to clear my schedule and also present something in a unique way that adds more value to it? Yes. So not only does it make my schedule lighter by just being able to say no to some games, even if I do think they're going to be really good, I can usually also use that situation to position any review I do on it into a unique place, as opposed to just being one in a sea of embargo reviews. So all in all, why is this a PC channel? Well, a variety of reasons. My own personal preference, just straight up convenience, help with my schedule, and plenty of other reasons. So realistically, if I ever wanted to go beyond PC, which truth be told, I don't really have any desire to, but if I did, I would legit probably have to practice using a controller for quite some time, because catching up to 20 plus years of muscle memory with another control scheme is not an easy thing to do. But I would also likely just straight up have to hire somebody else to help at that point, because I would need to focus more on actually playing the games, because I would have more games to play, and somebody else would just have to do the editing at that point. And while I wouldn't pretend that any of my videos are like spectacularly edited or anything, they're really simple, reality is right now I can say that I did that. And when you invite other people into it, it is no longer just my thing, but also I'm responsible for that person's well-being at that point. I have to make sure they get paid, and they have work to do to get paid. And with my prior work experience being in sales, where I had teams of like 50 or 60 direct reports at times, I know what it is to employ someone and to do it correctly. And that's ignoring entirely what the bumps in the road in terms of getting on board with an editor in step with my own workflow would be honestly a bit of a nightmare. For all of those reasons, that's why this is a PC channel. And if I ever wanted that to change, it would simply require growth that would take the channel in a direction I'm not really comfortable with. So for the foreseeable future, it is what it is. But I suppose in like 10 to 20 years, if I'm still doing this, maybe we'll reassess. For now, though, I think that's pretty much going to do it. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this, or at the very least it answered your question, I suppose. And chances are, if you're watching this, you're likely already subscribed, but just for the sake of saying it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.